This story happened way back in 2005, when I was 18 years old. At the time, I was living in Uvalde, Texas, a quiet rural town surrounded by long stretches of farmland and dusty highways. Uvalde was the kind of place where money was always tight and opportunities felt far away. My family lived in a low-income neighborhood, and like a lot of kids from there, my options after high school were pretty limited. College was always the dream, but the only thing my parents could afford was the local community college. So while some of my friends moved to bigger cities to chase new experiences, I stayed behind, stuck between responsibility and longing for something more. One of my closest friends from high school, Andrew, was one of the lucky ones. He moved to San Antonio to attend San Antonio College. He had a small apartment outside the city that he shared with a roommate, and his girlfriend often stayed with him too. San Antonio was only about an hour and a half from Uvalde, so I'd make the trip out there whenever I could. Visiting him always felt like an escape from my slow, suffocating hometown. One Friday, Andrew invited me to spend the weekend. I was excited. His girlfriend wouldn't be there until the next day, so it was going to be just the guys for a night of drinking and fun. I hopped into my trusty old 1995 Toyota pickup. Well, trusty was a stretch. The thing was a piece of junk. Dented doors, seats torn in the corners, and most annoyingly, a gas gauge that hadn't worked for years. I always had to reset the trip mileage after filling the tank and do mental math to keep track of how much gas I had left. I was careless about it sometimes, but somehow I'd managed to never run out completely. That Friday afternoon, around 3 p.m., I hit Route 90, the long straight road connecting Uvalde to San Antonio. The drive was easy. No traffic, just endless stretches of highway flanked by fields and scattered trees. I got to Andrew's place around 5, and sure enough, the night played out just like we'd planned. We picked up some liquor, drank at his apartment with his roommate, and later headed to a dive bar that was known to look the other way when it came to fake IDs. We laughed, drank too much, and stumbled back to his apartment around 2 a.m., grabbing greasy food on the way. I crashed on the couch, satisfied with the kind of night only 18-year-olds could pull off. The next day, though, things weren't nearly as fun. Andrew's girlfriend showed up, and the atmosphere changed quickly. The two of them started bickering almost immediately. As the day went on and the drinks flowed, their arguing escalated until she was yelling at him in front of me. I sat there awkward and uncomfortable, feeling like a third wheel in the middle of a fight I wanted no part of. I hadn't drunk much that day. I already had a bad feeling about sticking around with all that tension in the air. By late evening, I'd had enough. I told Andrew I was heading home. He seemed distracted, caught up in his argument, but gave me a quick hug and told me to drive safe. It was probably around midnight when I got on the road. Route 90 was pitch black at that hour, deserted except for the occasional car. With the cool night air streaming through the cracked window and no one else in sight, I pushed my old truck as fast as it would go. For a little while, it felt peaceful. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the dark stretch of highway. Then, it happened. The engine began to sputter. At first, I thought maybe it was just the old truck acting up again, but within seconds, the sound grew worse. My heart sank as the realization hit me. I had completely forgotten to refill the gas tank before leaving San Antonio. I slowed down, praying I could make it just a few more miles, but the truck gave one final gasp and died. I coasted to the shoulder and sat in stunned silence for a moment. I tried restarting it, turning the key over and over, but nothing happened. Dead. My stomach twisted with dread. I pulled out my phone, one of those old flip phones with a cracked screen, and checked for service. Nothing. Not even a single bar. I switched on my hazard lights and leaned back, waiting for help. Minutes stretched painfully. When headlights finally appeared in the distance, I jumped out and waved frantically. The car sped past, not even slowing down. 10 minutes later, another car came and did the same. After that, I stopped bothering. Out there in the dark, on an empty highway, I couldn't blame people for not wanting to stop. If I were in their place, I might have kept driving too. Resigned, I decided to just sleep in my truck until morning. I shut off the battery, reclined my seat, and closed my eyes. Every now and then I'd hear the whoosh of a passing car, but eventually, exhaustion began to pull me under. Then came the sound that changed everything. The heavy thunk of a car door closing. My eyes flew open. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a pickup truck parked right behind mine. Its headlights were off, making it all the more unsettling. I turned around in my seat, but couldn't see anyone. No movement, no figure, nothing. Maybe someone had pulled over to help. I cracked the door open and stepped out. "Excuse me?" I called into the dark. No answer. I walked closer to the truck. The cab was empty. I looked toward the tree line, thinking maybe someone had stepped into the woods. A chill crept up my spine. Something about the silence felt wrong. I hurried back into my own truck, locked the doors, and sat there gripping the wheel. That's when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap on the glass right next to my head. I jumped so hard my heart nearly stopped. Standing outside my window was a tall man grinning down at me. His smile didn't feel friendly. It was the kind of smile that sent shivers down your spine.
"Hey, buddy," he said casually, his voice muffled through the glass. "Need a hand?" I cracked the window just an inch. Yeah, ran out of gas," I stammered. "That's quite the predicament," he said, still smiling. "Step out and give me a hand with this real quick." For a split second, I actually thought he meant a gas can. Relieved, I got out of the truck. But instead of leading me to his, he just stood there, looming over me. "I need you to empty your pockets," he said flatly. My brain froze. Was this guy seriously trying to rob me? I was a broke college kid driving a beater pickup. What did he think I had? But the threat was clear. He wasn't here to help. Without thinking, I turned and bolted for the trees. He shouted and gave chase. My legs pumped harder than they ever had in my life. Branches whipped at my arms as I zigzagged through the darkness, trying to lose him. My lungs burned, but adrenaline kept me moving. Finally, I ducked behind a massive tree, crouching low. My chest heaved as I tried to quiet my breath. That's when I heard him again, his footsteps crunching through the leaves, getting closer. "I'll kill you, you piece of..." he growled into the night. I froze, every muscle screaming to move, but I didn't dare. Whether he meant for me to hear or was just spitting rage, it terrified me beyond words. I stayed perfectly still, pressed against the bark, until his footsteps faded. Even then, I didn't move. I stayed hidden the entire night, too scared to step back onto the road. By dawn, exhaustion had nearly overtaken me. When I finally emerged from the trees, the man's truck was gone. But my stomach dropped when I saw mine. Both doors wide open, glove box emptied, my things scattered. A hoodie I'd left inside was gone, along with whatever little value I had stored. Shaking, I stood by the road until a kind stranger finally stopped. He listened to my story with wide eyes and offered me a ride to the nearest gas station. I bought a small fuel can, filled it, and he drove me back so I could get just enough gas to make it to town. I filled up the tank completely at the first station I found, then drove straight home, shaken to my core. That night changed me. Up until then, I'd been pretty naive. I thought running out of gas would just be a minor inconvenience. But I learned the hard way that the world has both kinds of people. Those who'll prey on you when you're most vulnerable, and those who'll show kindness when you need it most. I'll never forget either of them.
When I was 18, I was still incredibly immature and naive. I had just enough independence to think I knew everything, but not nearly enough wisdom to realize how wrong I was. On the road, especially, I was a bit of a jerk. I honked whenever I got impatient, rode too close to other cars, and even cut people off on occasion. Looking back now, I cringe at the way I used to drive. If I ever have kids, I'll be strict with them about driving habits. I know firsthand how quickly arrogance behind the wheel can turn into danger.
At the time, I drove a beat-up Mazda 3. I put it through hell, speeding, slamming brakes, and constantly pushing it to its limits. One of my worst habits was running the gas tank nearly empty before bothering to fill up. Friends would comment on it when they rode with me, pointing nervously at the fuel needle hovering over E. I'd just laugh and assure them, "Don't worry, I can get another 30 miles easy." It was careless, and that recklessness eventually caught up with me. It was the beginning of winter break, right after my fall semester ended. Most of my college friends had already left for home earlier that day, but I wanted to wait until late at night before hitting the road. I hated traffic, and driving home after dark cut my 5-hour trip down to closer to 3. It was a long drive, but I had done it plenty of times before and felt confident I'd be fine. An hour into my trip, though, I noticed the gas gauge firmly on E. I knew I was pushing my luck, but I figured I'd spot a sign for a gas station soon enough. Instead of pulling up the map on my phone and looking for the nearest one, I just kept driving, waiting for the road to save me. Then my car started making odd sounds, chugging, jolting, and my stomach sank. I realized with horror that I had finally done it. I'd run the tank empty. I took the first exit ramp I could find, praying it would lead me straight to a gas station. The ramp was long and dark, lined with woods on both sides. No streetlights, no buildings, just blackness. My headlights cut through only a small patch of the road ahead. I pressed the accelerator, trying to keep my momentum in case the engine died completely, and blew right through the stop sign at the end. I made a sharp left turn onto another empty, wooded road, and that was it. The Mazda coughed, sputtered, and went silent. The car rolled to a stop, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. When I pulled out my phone, my heart sank even further. No service. I had T-Mobile, which meant coverage in remote areas was non-existent. Out of desperation, I even tried dialing 911, thinking maybe emergency calls would work without a signal. They didn't. So there I sat, an 18-year-old girl alone on a desolate road, miles from anything, defenseless. Fear crept in fast. I turned on my hazard lights and prayed that someone would come by. The minutes dragged on. Finally, headlights appeared in the distance. I flashed mine desperately, waving my arms through the window. The car passed me, slowed down, and then made a U-turn. It pulled onto the grass behind me. My heart raced.
I didn't know who was getting out, and panic flooded me. Was this help or trouble? I cracked my window just slightly as a man approached. "Need a hand?" he asked. I explained that I had run out of gas, my voice shaking. "I can give you a ride to the nearest gas station," he said matter-of-factly. He was bald, wore glasses, and at first glance looked like a regular middle-aged guy. He didn't seem threatening, but I was still wary. Yet, what choice did I have? My phone was useless, my car was dead, and no one else might pass for hours. Against my gut instinct, I agreed. I got out of my Mazda, locking the doors tightly behind me, and followed him to his car. It was a black Honda, maybe a 2010. The interior smelled strange, musky, sour, hard to place. I tried to ignore it as I buckled in. He made another U-turn and began driving back the way he had come. To ease the silence, he struck up conversation. He asked where I was from, what school I went to, and how long I'd been driving. I answered honestly, telling him I was heading home from college. He nodded and said he lived nearby, that not many out-of-towners ended up in his small town off the interstate. His words were calm, casual, but something about the way he talked non-stop put me on edge. The road stretched endlessly, just dark woods on either side. No buildings, no lights, no signs of civilization. I finally asked if he knew of any gas stations. "Yeah, just a ways up," he said smoothly. That's when I heard it. A thump, then another, then a faint bumping noise from behind us. At first, I assumed it was just the trunk shifting over rough patches of road. But the noise grew louder, Irregular, frantic. It didn't sound like something sliding around. It sounded like something alive. I froze, listening closely, but the man kept talking, oblivious. I stared out the window, my stomach tightening. The noises continued, banging, thumping, like fists hitting metal. Then, as we rolled into a small town area at last, the noise escalated into something I will never forget. A muffled, desperate scream. My blood turned to ice. At the red light, the car finally fell silent. And in that silence came another unmistakable sound. Someone crying out, pounding from inside the trunk. I whipped my head toward the man. For a second, our eyes met. His calm expression faltered, and in that split second, I realized the horrifying truth.
I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. I unbuckled, flung the door open, and bolted. "Hey!" he shouted, lunging to grab me. His fingers brushed my arm, but I yanked free and sprinted toward the diner I had seen across the intersection. My heart hammered as I ran, expecting to feel his grip on me again, but when I glanced back, he wasn't chasing me. Instead, he was slamming his passenger door shut. A moment later, his tires screeched and the black Honda tore down the street. I burst into the diner, gasping for breath, screaming for help. Every eye in the place turned toward me as I babbled about the man, the car, and the screams in the trunk. The staff rushed to comfort me, and someone handed me the landline. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Within minutes, multiple police cars arrived, lights flashing. Officers surrounded me, notebooks ready, asking for every detail: the car's make, model, color, the man's appearance, the road where he picked me up. I answered everything I could through trembling lips. They took it seriously, deadly serious. One officer drove me back to my car so they could confirm the pickup location. They stayed with me until AAA arrived and filled my tank. Even then, I couldn't stop shaking. My body buzzed with adrenaline, my mind replaying the sound of those screams over and over. The rest of my drive home that night was a blur. I clutched the wheel, hyper-aware of every shadow, every set of headlights behind me. I didn't feel safe until I pulled into my driveway hours later. To this day, I don't know what became of that man or who was in his trunk. I never saw anything about it in the news. Maybe the police found him, maybe they didn't. All I know is that I was one unlucky decision away from becoming another body in that trunk. It was the scariest experience of my life, and it changed me forever.
I live in Burke County, North Carolina, in the small town of Morganton. Life here is usually quiet, predictable, and simple. The kind of lifestyle that comes with being surrounded by woods, farmland, and long, winding roads. Sure, we have our share of strange characters, but nothing too alarming most of the time. I own a nice little plot of land with my husband, and we live a modest, peaceful life. Because I'm a nurse, my work schedule is constantly changing. Sometimes I work long days, other times overnight shifts. This particular night, I was just coming off a grueling night shift. It must have been around 3 in the morning when I finally left the hospital. I was exhausted, hungry, and desperate to get home. My phone battery was on its last legs, barely a few percent left, and I wanted to grab something quick to eat before collapsing into bed. I stopped at a gas station not far from the hospital. I put $10 worth of gas into my car, then went inside to grab a packaged sandwich from the cooler. I sat down in the little cafe area inside the gas station to eat before hitting the road. While I ate, I noticed a man staring at me. He didn't buy anything, just stood there, watching me, for far too long before eventually walking out. It put me on edge, but I'd brushed it off. I was used to odd people hanging around late at night. When I finished, I walked back outside, topped off the gas, and got into my car. The smell of gasoline was unusually strong, almost overpowering, but I figured maybe the pump had leaked or I'd spilled a little.
Shrugging it off, I pulled out onto the road. These mountain roads are dark and twisty at night, so I drove slower than usual, especially since I was tired. That's when something strange happened. The gas gauge needle, which had been comfortably above E just minutes ago, suddenly dropped. The low fuel light flicked on, and a loud beep rang out. My heart jumped. I just filled the tank. How could I possibly be out of gas? Confused, I pulled to the side of the road and restarted the car, thinking maybe the computer had glitched, but the needle stayed glued to empty. I tried driving a little further, hoping it was just a malfunction. Instead, the engine sputtered and died. Panic washed over me. I had never run out of gas before, and I couldn't understand what was happening. My chest tightened as I tried to calm my breathing. The first thing I did was call my husband. By some miracle, he picked up, groggy but alert when he heard the fear in my voice.
I just filled up, I said frantically. Now the car's dead and I smell gasoline everywhere.
He paused. That sounds like a leak, he said. Stay where you are, I'll call roadside assistance and head your way right now. As he spoke, I heard another sound, a car approaching behind me. No headlights. My stomach dropped. The vehicle slowed and stopped a short distance from my car, its engine idling. My mind flashed back to the sketchy man who had been watching me at the gas station. A cold realization hit me. Could someone have done this on purpose? I whispered into the phone. That guy at the station, could he have messed with my car? My husband's tone changed immediately. He sounded more worried than before. Yes, there's a chance he cut your fuel line. The words meant little to me mechanically, but I understood enough. It was deliberate. Someone had sabotaged my car. Get out of there, my husband said firmly. Adrenaline surged through me. I yanked the keys from the ignition, locked the doors, and bolted into the dark, leaving the car's headlights off to make it less visible. My phone was on 2% battery. My husband promised to text me when he got close, so I told him I'd stay hidden until then. I sprinted off the road and ran toward the first house I could find, my sneakers crunching gravel as I tore down a long driveway. My lungs burned, my heart hammering, but finally I reached the porch. The house was completely dark. I rang the bell over and over until, at last, a light flicked on inside. A man in his 60s opened the door, squinting in confusion. I spilled out my story in a rush, begging to come inside, charge my phone, and wait for my husband. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped aside and let me in. Relief flooded me. I sat down in his living room, still in my scrubs, trembling. He disappeared into the kitchen, saying he'd look for a charger. A moment later, he called out, "Want some water?" I answered automatically, my throat dry from running. That's when I noticed something chilling. There was a mirror in the living room angled just right, giving me a partial view of the kitchen. In it, I clearly saw him fill a glass with water, then drop something into it. The faucet kept running for another 30 seconds after he'd set the cup aside.
My blood ran cold. He came back, handed me the water with a pleasant smile, and sat across from me. "Tell me again what happened," he said casually. I thanked him for the water, but didn't drink it. My phone was now at 1%. With shaking fingers, I used the last bit of power to send my husband my location, just in case. Then I set the phone in my lap, pretending to fiddle with it. The man got up and went upstairs, saying he'd check for another charger. My instincts screamed at me. I didn't need confirmation. I knew he'd put something in that water. As soon as I heard his footsteps descending again, I stood, thanked him quickly, and headed straight for the door. He called after me that he didn't have an iPhone charger anyway, but I didn't wait around. Once outside, I ran down the driveway back toward the road, bile rising in my throat. The night felt suffocating. How could it be that in the span of an hour, I'd nearly been targeted by not one, but two different men? I crept along the roadside, sticking close to the trees for cover. My phone finally died, leaving me completely disconnected. The minutes dragged like hours until I saw headlights in the distance, familiar headlights. It was my husband's truck. I stumbled out, waving my arms.
Relief surged when he stopped and I climbed inside. The moment I felt safe, I broke down, sobbing into his chest, telling him everything. We drove back to my car, and sure enough, the other vehicle was gone. But the sight that greeted us was horrifying. My back window was shattered, and it looked like someone had climbed inside. Nothing of real value was missing, but the car battery had been drained completely. When I told my husband about the man in the house and how I'd seen him slip something into the water, his fury boiled over. He wanted to storm back there and confront him, but I begged him not to. I just wanted to wait for the tow truck and go home. We waited together until the tow finally arrived. The next day, the dealership confirmed what my husband had suspected. The fuel line had been deliberately cut. My car had been vandalized on purpose. I was lucky. Twice in one night, I could have ended up a victim. The idea that two different strangers might have been targeting me still makes me shiver. For the next several days, I couldn't shake the fear. Every sound at night made me jump. I kept replaying both moments in my mind: the man at the gas station with his piercing stare, and the man in the house dropping something into the water. I'll never forget how close I came to danger, not once, but twice in a single night.